He thought he was marrying the love of his life. 2 days later, she was dead, lying in a pool of blood on their honeymoon cabin floor. Shot 6 times. But when police asked him why he did it, he didn't say because she cheated. He didn't say because she lied. He just whispered, "She used to be my best friend." This is the story of Darius Simmons, a wedding that began with vows and ended with bullets, and a secret so deep it shattered a man's identity and left America asking, how far will someone go when the truth destroys everything they thought they were? They said love always finds a way, but sometimes it finds a way right back into your nightmares. It was a sunny afternoon in Atlanta, Georgia, when Darius Simmons stood at the altar with a look in his eyes that hadn't been there in over a decade. Hope, love, redemption. At 42, after a painful divorce and years of emotional isolation, Darius had finally found someone who made him believe in second chances. Her name was Elena. She was radiant that day, a soft ivory dress hugging her figure, her curls pinned loosely above her neck, and those calm, honey-brown eyes that seemed to understand parts of Darius he never spoke out loud. There was something about Elena that made people lean in. Not just her beauty, which was undeniable, but her energy, composed, selfless, nurturing. She wasn't loud. She wasn't flashy. But when she smiled, the room listened. The wedding was small, intentionally so. Just 30 guests. Mostly Darius's close friends, a few of Elena's coworkers from the clinic where she worked as a skincare specialist, and no family on her side. She had told him early on that her family was complicated, scattered across different states, and that she hadn't spoken to most of them in years. Darius, a man with his own fractured family story, didn't push. They exchanged vows in front of a stained glass window at Mount Zion Baptist Church, the very church Darius was baptized in as a boy. Elena's voice trembled when she promised to love him without masks, without fear, with all that I am. The words landed heavy on him, but not in a bad way. He thought she meant it poetically, symbolically. He never imagined how literal those words would become. After the ceremony, they held a simple reception in the church hall. Fried catfish, mac and cheese, and sweet tea. A playlist of Luther Vandross, Anita Baker, and a bit of old-school Stevie Wonder filled the room. Darius laughed more that night than he had in years. His best friend Marcus raised a toast, joking that Darius had found a woman with enough patience to love his stubborn self. Everyone cheered. Elena blushed, but there was something subtle, something quiet behind her eyes. A flicker of nervousness when someone asked where she grew up. A pause when the pastor mentioned new beginnings. Darius caught it, but dismissed it. He didn't want to be suspicious. He had already been through the kind of relationship that left him paranoid. He was done with that. Later that night, in their hotel suite on Peachtree Street, Elena stood on the balcony in a silk robe, looking out over the city lights. Darius watched her from the bed, thinking to himself how lucky he was. She turned and met his gaze. "You good?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Better than I've been in a long time." She walked over, sat beside him, and took his hand. "I just want you to know, whatever we face, I'll never walk away. I'm here, Darius. Fully. Completely." There was again that tone. So intentional. So absolute. It felt heavy. But again he smiled and kissed her hand. "I know," he whispered. "And I believe you." They made love slowly that night, gently. Elena kept the lights dimmed, said she was still shy about her body. Darius didn't mind. He found her modesty endearing, almost refreshing in a world of overexposure. And truthfully, he had fallen for her so long before he saw her skin. He didn't need more than what she gave. But behind that intimacy, a quiet question began to stir. Not a loud suspicion, just a faint murmur. Why does she seem afraid to let me see her fully? By sunrise, it was gone. The next morning, they drove up to a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains for a short honeymoon. Elena had planned every detail. She knew his favorite bourbon, his aversion to cold weather, even that he snored after eating heavy meals. Darius was impressed. She was attentive, thoughtful, always one step ahead. But as they unpacked, Darius noticed a small black notebook fall from Elena's bag. He picked it up without thinking, planning to hand it to her. But when he glanced at the open page, he paused. Written in neat cursive was a name he hadn't seen in over 20 years. Jordan I. Harris. The penmanship was familiar. So was the name. Darius felt his stomach tighten. Jordan Harris. His best friend from senior year. The one who vanished the summer before graduation. The one who knew his every secret. The one who disappeared without saying goodbye. He quickly closed the notebook as Elena walked back into the room. "What's that?" she asked casually. "Just one of your journals, I think." It fell out. She looked at it for a moment, then smiled. But it didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks," she said, and tucked it away in the drawer. Darius didn't ask. He didn't want to ruin the moment. But that night, as they lay beside each other, the memory of Jordan Harris, soft-spoken, creative, always watching him from the back row of English class, crept into his mind like a whisper. And for the first time since saying "I do," something inside Darius felt unsettled. That night, long after Elena had fallen asleep, Darius lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, lazy circles. The cabin was silent, but his mind was a storm. He couldn't shake the name he'd seen in that journal. Jordan I. Harris. He hadn't thought about Jordan in years. Not really. But now, the memories came rushing back like water through a broken dam. Senior year. Booker T. Washington High School. 1997. Jordan was different. Not in the loud, attention-seeking way. He wasn't flamboyant or rebellious. He was quiet, almost too quiet, but observant. Artistic. Witty. He had this way of studying people like they were puzzles he already knew how to solve. Most guys didn't hang out with Jordan because he didn't play sports and didn't chase girls. But Darius did. Somehow they clicked. Jordan was the only person who truly saw past the bravado Darius put on at school. He knew about Darius's drunk father. About the nights he had to sleep in the bathtub to avoid getting hit. About the pain he hid behind his wide grin and deep laugh. And Jordan never judged him, never tried to fix him. He just stayed. They'd sit on the rooftop of the old library after school, eating flamin' hot Cheetos and talking about music, girls, and dreams. Jordan used to sketch Darius when he wasn't looking, then tear the page out before he could see it. One day, Darius caught him. "Man, why you always drawing me?" he teased, half joking. Jordan shrugged, eyes darting away. "You've got an interesting face." Darius laughed it off back then. But later, when he looked in the mirror, he wondered what Jordan saw that was so worth drawing. Then there was that night in May. The night everything changed. They had snuck into the school gym after hours, shooting hoops under the emergency lights, talking about prom and college and life after high school. It was almost midnight when Jordan suddenly asked, "You ever wish you were someone else?" Darius looked at him, surprised. Like, I don't know, just someone people could actually see for who they are. Without judgment, without expectations. He didn't say more. And Darius, too young to understand the weight of those words, just nodded and changed the subject. A few weeks later, Jordan was gone. No goodbye, no phone call, just gone. Rumors spread. Some said he moved to LA to live with his aunt. Others whispered he'd been sent to some kind of facility. A few even claimed they saw him wearing makeup in a mall downtown, but no one ever confirmed anything. Darius tried to move on. He told himself it didn't matter, that they were just high school friends. But deep down, he always felt that hole, a quiet ache that never quite healed, like a book with the last chapter ripped out. Back in the present, Darius sat up in bed and looked at Elena. She was turned away from him, breathing softly, her bare shoulder rising and falling beneath the blanket. Her features were soft, delicate, but there was something familiar in the curve of her jaw, the slope of her nose, the way she curled slightly in her sleep. No, he told himself, it's not possible. But then the voice came. The voice that used to laugh at his jokes in study hall. The voice that once whispered through tears, "You deserve better, D." The voice that defended him when bullies mocked his torn sneakers and empty lunch tray. That voice sounded an awful lot like Elena's. Darius rose from bed slowly, careful not to wake her. He walked to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and splashed cold water on his face. His reflection looked tired, not just from lack of sleep, but from something deeper. Confusion, betrayal, fear. He opened the mirror cabinet. No pills, no makeup, nothing unusual. He walked back into the room and opened the drawer where Elena had tucked the journal earlier. It was gone. He checked the closet. Her luggage was neatly zipped. No signs of anything suspicious. No old photos, no documents. Just perfectly folded clothes and a lavender-scented body spray. But something else caught his eye. A scar, faint but visible, on the inner side of Elena's right thigh. He had seen it earlier, in a brief moment when she had stepped out of the shower the morning before. A long, narrow scar that stretched diagonally. The same scar Jordan had gotten after falling on a rusty pipe behind the gym sophomore year. He remembered it vividly. Darius had carried Jordan on his back all the way to the nurse's office that day. They had laughed about it, joking that he was Jordan's knight in shining armor. Suddenly, it didn't feel so funny anymore. He sat back on the edge of the bed, gripping the edge of the mattress, his mind spinning. Was it her? Was it him? What the hell was happening? At that moment, Elena stirred, her voice groggy. Darius? You okay? He turned, staring at her like she was a ghost. I just had trouble sleeping, he said. She sat up, reaching for his hand. Want to talk? He hesitated, then pulled away. Not right now. Elena nodded slowly. Her eyes studied his face, sensing the shift, feeling the distance forming in real time. But she didn't push. She just lay back down, her back turned once more. And as the sun crept through the cabin window, painting the walls with soft amber light, Darius stared into the morning air, haunted by a question he wasn't ready to answer. Had he just married the boy who once saved his life and now might destroy it? The third day of their honeymoon began with silence. No warm kisses. No morning coffee brewed by Elena like she had the day before. Just a quiet tension that filled the cozy cabin like fog. Thick, unspoken, impossible to ignore. Darius had barely slept. The scar, the journal, the voice, the eyes. His mind had become a courtroom. Part of him, the cold prosecutor, laying out the facts with brutal precision. The other part, a scared boy on the stand, heart pounding, refusing to believe what was right in front of him. By noon, Elena had noticed the shift. Baby, she said gently, placing a hand on his arm as he stood near the window, pretending to admire the pine trees outside. You've been quiet all morning. Is something wrong? He didn't answer at first. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. Darius, please don't shut me out. Not now. He turned to her slowly. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't even hurt. They were hollow, like he had already left and only his body remained. I have a question, he said, and I need the truth. Elena blinked, trying to brace herself. Okay. He pulled out the black journal from his pocket, the one she thought she had hidden, and held it up. Jordan Isaiah Harris. Who is that? Her breath caught. It was the kind of moment where the world doesn't explode, it just stops. She looked down, then up, then took a step back, as if the truth might hit harder than a fist. I was going to tell you, she whispered. I didn't know how. He stared at her, heart thudding in his ears. Tell me what? Her voice broke. That I used to be him. The room spun. She sat down on the edge of the couch, hands trembling in her lap. Jordan was me. I was Jordan, before I became Elena. Darius said nothing. The walls of the cabin seemed to close in. Darius said nothing. The walls of the cabin seemed to close in. And Elena, for the first time, let herself unfold. California wasn't a miracle. It was survival, she said, voice trembling but firm. The day I got on that Greyhound bus, I didn't know if I was running away or running toward something. Maybe both. She paused, then continued, slower now, as if remembering cost her energy. My aunt took me in. She didn't understand, but she gave me a room, a door I could close. That alone felt like a kind of love. I got a job at a diner, saved up for hormones. Had to take the bus 2 hours to a clinic in Oakland because no one in my zip code would treat someone like me. I was 19, scared, and ashamed of my own voice. I used to practice speaking in the mirror until my throat went raw. She looked down at her hands, then up again. The first time someone called me ma'am, I went into the restroom and cried for 20 minutes. Not because I was happy, but because I finally felt real. But it wasn't easy. I lost friends. My mom stopped calling. I had to bury Jordan, not just the name, but the memories. The rooftop chats, the laughter, you, all of it. Darius's face was unreadable, but his hands trembled. And then one day, I saw you at that little grocery store off Glenwood. You were in line with a six-pack and a tired look in your eyes. But when you saw me, you smiled. The same crooked, beautiful smile I'd seen 1,000 times before. She blinked, tears forming again. In that moment, something woke up in me. Something I thought was long dead. And I told myself, maybe this time, maybe I get to have one thing in this life that doesn't end in goodbye. I've known since I was little that something didn't fit, she continued, voice barely a whisper. I didn't feel like a boy. I didn't want to be one. But growing up in the South in our neighborhood, there was no room for people like me. She paused, as if choosing each word carefully, not to manipulate, but to survive. You were the only person who ever made me feel like I was real, like I mattered. You didn't even know it, but every time you defended me, every time you listened to me talk about stupid art projects or dreams that didn't make sense, you made me believe I could become someone I truly was. Tears welled in her eyes. And then senior year, it got too hard. I couldn't live the lie anymore. My mom sent me away to live with my aunt in California. That's where I started transitioning. Therapy, hormones, surgery, years of pain, years of hiding. But I did it. She took a deep breath. When I came back and I saw you at the grocery store that day, I didn't plan anything. I didn't even think you'd remember me. But then you smiled. The same damn smile you had at 17. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe fate wasn't done with us. Darius sat down across from her, silent, stiff. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. I wanted to tell you before we got serious, she said. I swear to God I did. But every time I tried, I saw the way you looked at me, like I was your piece, your second chance. And I was scared that if I told you the truth, I'd lose everything. The clock ticked. Somewhere outside, a bird chirped. It sounded almost cruel, too cheerful for a moment like this. So what were you planning to do? Darius finally asked, his voice low and sharp. Just live your whole life lying to me. No, she said. I was going to tell you. I just needed more time. You had years, he snapped. You had months. You had our whole relationship to come clean. And you waited until I found a goddamn name in a notebook. She flinched at the venom in his tone. I didn't lie about how I felt. I love you, Darius. That was always real. He stood up, pacing now, hands on his head. You let me marry you. You stood in front of God and said vows, knowing I didn't even know who the hell you really are. I'm the same person you fell in love with, she said, tears spilling now. I didn't change. Just my truth is more complicated than most. No, he growled. You're not the same. You used to be a man. That's not a detail you leave out. Silence. Then, in a voice so soft it barely registered, I didn't think you'd love me if you knew. He turned, face red. You were right. Those words hit harder than a slap. Elena wiped her tears, steadying herself. I won't defend how I handled it. I made mistakes, but I didn't come into your life to hurt you, Darius. I came because I loved you. Still do. Darius stared at her for a long time. But all he saw now was the boy he used to call his brother, the one who watched him cry in secret, the one who knew all his scars, the one who, somehow, had become his wife. And he didn't know if that made him feel betrayed or broken. Without another word, he walked to the door, opened it, and stepped outside. The cold mountain air slapped his face, but it didn't wake him up, because nothing about this felt real anymore. Inside, Elena sat alone on the couch, her wedding ring catching a glint of sunlight as she whispered into the silence. I just wanted to be loved by you. Darius didn't know how long he stood outside. The wind bit at his skin, but the cold was nothing compared to the storm unraveling inside him. His wife, his best friend, he didn't have the words for what he was feeling. Rage? Shame? Grief? Whatever it was gnawing at his insides like acid. He tried to breathe, but every breath felt like betrayal. He stumbled down the porch steps of the cabin, hands trembling, barely able to keep himself upright. His feet carried him blindly into the trees, like he was trying to outrun something that had already taken root inside his chest. In the woods, far from Elena's voice, Far from the journal, far from the past, Darius finally collapsed against a tree and screamed. It wasn't just a yell, it was an eruption. Raw, guttural, like a wounded animal crying out for a part of itself that had been ripped away. And maybe that's exactly what had happened. He didn't know what hurt more, the fact that Elena had lied, or the fact that a part of him still loved her. Still saw her the way he did before everything came crashing down. That part made him feel sick. How could I not know? How could I have kissed her, touched her, slept with her, and not known? What does that say about me? The questions came fast and hard, hitting like blows. He thought about his father, a man who beat the softness out of him from the time he was 9. A man who once said, "A man who don't know what's between a woman's legs ain't a man at all." Darius had spent his whole life trying not to become his father. But now, that voice, cold and judgmental, was all he could hear. He hurled a rock across the clearing. It slammed into a tree with a dull thud. Then another. Then another. He kept throwing until his hands bled and his chest heaved with sobs he'd never let anyone see. When he finally returned to the cabin, the sun was beginning to set. Elena was in the kitchen, making dinner. The smell of garlic and rosemary filled the air. As if nothing had changed. As if she could cook her way through the fallout of a secret that had shattered a marriage before it had even begun. "You still think this is normal?" Darius said coldly from the doorway. She turned slowly, her face pale. "I thought maybe you'd be hungry." He walked over, picked up the cast iron pan, and slammed it into the sink, shattering the silence with the sound of metal against porcelain. "Stop pretending everything is okay." "I'm not," she began. "Don't lie to me again," he barked. Elena's lips quivered, but she stood her ground. "You're angry. I get it. But I'm still the same person who held your hand when your mother died. The same person who sat in that cafe for hours just to hear you talk about your dreams." Darius stepped forward. "You're not that person. That person was a man. And you knew I'd never be okay with this." Her face twisted. "Then maybe I never should have loved you." He flinched. The word loved hit him like a slap. "Do you know what you've done to me?" he said, voice cracking now. "You made me feel whole, safe. You made me believe in something real. And now," he couldn't finish. The words just broke. She stepped toward him, slowly. "Darius, what we had wasn't fake. You felt it. You know you did." He turned away, gripping the edge of the counter like it might keep him upright. "I don't know what I feel anymore," he whispered. Elena reached for him, but he jerked away violently. "Don't touch me." There was silence again. Thick, unbearable. Then he stormed into the bedroom, ripped open the drawer, and pulled out the black Glock 19 he kept in a locked case. Registered. Legal. Meant for self-defense. He held in his hands and stared. The weight of it. The cold truth of it. He sat on the bed and looked down the barrel. Not because he wanted to die, but because he didn't know how to live like this. His identity, his masculinity, felt hijacked. Stolen by someone he trusted. By someone he loved. He set the gun down. Covered his face with his hands, and wept. Later that night, Elena slept on the couch. Darius didn't say anything. He sat in the bedroom with the gun on the nightstand, the journal in his lap, and a glass of bourbon he hadn't touched. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "How's the honeymoon, bro? Y'all good?" He stared at it for a long time. Then, for the first time, he typed back. "No, I married a lie." He hit send. In the stillness that followed, he opened the journal again. There on one of the back pages was a sketch. It was him, 17 years old, head down, eyes soft, drawn in pencil with aching detail. Below it, in small handwriting, "You were always my reason to keep going." Darius closed the journal, tears burning behind his eyes again. How do you grieve someone who's still alive? How do you kill a love that never asked to be born in the first place? The answer, he thought grimly, was simpler than he wanted to admit. And as darkness swallowed the cabin, Darius Simmons stared into the void of a man he no longer recognized. The cabin was quiet that morning. Too quiet. There was no sizzle of bacon, no smell of coffee drifting through the wood-paneled walls. Just stillness, heavy and sharp like glass waiting to shatter. Elena lay curled on the couch beneath a faded plaid blanket. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hands folded beneath her chin like a child lost in prayer. Darius stood in the bedroom, fully dressed. boots tied, coat zipped, Glock 19 resting cold in his right hand. His mind was no longer racing. The storm had passed, and what remained was a hollow calm, the kind that comes not from peace, but from decision. He walked into the kitchen, slow, measured, mechanical. Elena stirred as she heard the floorboards creak. She looked up, blinking into the early light. "Morning," she whispered. Darius didn't answer. He placed a single mug of coffee on the table. Her favorite, hazelnut creamer, 2 sugars. He had made it silently before she woke up. She sat up slowly, unsure. "You made coffee?" He nodded, eyes unreadable. Elena wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and moved cautiously toward the table. Her voice trembled. "Darius, can we talk? Really talk?" He didn't respond. Just stood there, still as stone, as she took a small sip. Then another. She looked up at him, eyes glassy. "I know you're hurt. I know I should have told you the truth sooner. But what we had, it wasn't fake. You meant everything to me." His voice finally broke the silence. "Tell me one thing." She nodded. "Was this your plan the whole time?" he asked, low and tight. "To find me, marry me, and what, trap me?" "No," she whispered. "It was never like that." He stepped forward just one step. "Then what was it, Elena?" She set the mug down, her fingers trembling now. "I was in love with you long before I ever became me. And when I saw you again, I thought maybe God was giving me a second chance. I didn't mean to lie. I just wanted to be seen. As I am." Darius tilted his head. "You wanted to be seen?" "Yes." He exhaled sharply, then pulled the gun from beneath his coat. "You're about to be." Elena froze. "Darius," her voice cracked. "Please." He raised the gun. "I loved you," he said, voice shaking now. "I trusted you. I gave you everything I had left. And you stood in front of God, in front of me, wearing a face that was never yours." Tears streamed down her cheeks. She held out her hands, slowly. "I'm still me. I didn't lie to hurt you. I lied because I was afraid. Afraid you'd look at me like you are now. You made me question everything," he snapped. "Who I am. What I am. You made me feel." He stopped, choking on the word. "You made me feel like I wasn't even a man." Her voice rose, desperate now. "You are a man. You always were. And you didn't fall in love with a label. You fell in love with a soul. Mine." But the words didn't reach him. Not anymore. He closed his eyes and pulled the trigger. Bang. The first shot hit her shoulder. She collapsed against the table, screaming in pain, hand clutching at her arm. "Darius, please." Bang. Another shot tore through her rib cage, sending blood across the wall. She crawled backward, sobbing, gasping for breath. Bang. Her thigh. She screamed again, voice hoarse and ragged. He stepped closer, cold, expressionless. Like a man carrying out an execution he didn't want to admit he'd rehearsed. Bang. Her abdomen. Bang. Her chest. She was choking now, coughing blood, her hands shaking as she tried to reach for him. Not to fight, not to plead. Just a touch. One last time. Bang. The sixth and final shot went through her heart. And then there was only silence. Her body slumped against the kitchen cabinet, legs folded awkwardly beneath her. The coffee mug lay shattered at her side, hazelnut liquid mixing with her blood on the wooden floor. Darius stood over her, shaking, not from regret, not yet, but from the terrifying stillness inside his soul. He dropped the gun. It clattered against the tile. He dropped to his knees, staring at what he had done. For a long time, he didn't move. Then, as if something inside him broke free, he crawled forward and cradled her in his arms, her blood soaking into his shirt. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "God, I'm sorry." But she couldn't hear him. She was gone. And in her hand, clenched tight, even in death, was a folded slip of paper. He opened it with shaking fingers. On it, written in her neat handwriting, was a single line. "I forgive you, even if you never forgive me." He wept then, violently, like a man who had killed not only the woman he loved, but every part of himself that ever believed in love again. He wept then, violently, like a man who had killed not only the woman he loved, but every part of himself that ever believed in love again. But then something strange happened. The weeping stopped. It wasn't that the pain left him. It just froze, like it had sunk so deep inside his bones it couldn't escape anymore. Darius looked down at his hands, slick with blood, shaking, and for a second that they didn't feel like his. They felt borrowed, possessed, as if the man who pulled that trigger had disappeared the moment the final shot echoed into the wood. He stood up, slow, robotic, stepped over the pool of blood, and walked to the kitchen drawer. He pulled out a roll of paper towels, unspooled it, then stopped halfway. His fingers curled, then trembled, and then he dropped to his knees. With her blood still on his hands, he pressed one palm against the wooden floor, then the other, and with his finger, he began to write. Yelena, just 5 letters, but they bled into the grain like a confession carved into God's own table. He sat there, staring at the name, not crying, not praying, just empty, hollowed out like the barrel of the gun he'd just used. A fly buzzed past his ear. He didn't flinch. The sunlight through the window touched her cheek. He didn't look. In his mind, she was still alive, still standing, still smiling in that white dress, whispering fully, completely. But on the floor, in front of him, was the price of his fear, and the name of the only person who ever loved him enough to forgive him, even before he pulled the trigger. Outside, in the distance, a neighbor heard the shots and called 911. By the time officers arrived, Darius was sitting in the kitchen, covered in blood, rocking back and forth with her lifeless body in his lap. He didn't resist arrest, didn't speak, didn't ask for a lawyer. When one of the officers asked what had happened, Darius simply looked up and said, "She lied," but deep down he knew the truth. She didn't lie to destroy him. She lied to be loved. And in the end, the only thing he destroyed was both of them. The call came in at 7:42 a.m. A neighbor, out walking her dog through the pine trails behind the cabins, reported hearing what she thought were fireworks. 6 rapid pops in the distance. Too precise, too sharp. Then nothing. Dispatch sent a unit to check. Officer Marlon Hayes was the first to arrive, rolling up the gravel drive with his window cracked, hand already resting on the holster. He'd worked in these mountains for 13 years and knew one thing for certain. Fireworks didn't go off in the dead quiet of January. The cabin looked peaceful from the outside. Smoke curled from the chimney. No broken windows. No blood on the porch. But the silence was wrong. Too wrong. Hayes stepped out of the cruiser, boots crunching in the frost-covered gravel. He knocked once. No answer. Then again. Louder. Still nothing. He radioed in. Unit 23. Unseen. No response at door. Possible 10 to 54. Proceeding with caution. His hand tightened around the grip of his weapon as he turned the knob. Unlocked. The door creaked open, and what he saw froze him in place. A man, mid-40s, African-American, broad shoulders, blood on his shirt, hands shaking like he was trying to keep his soul from falling apart, sat on the floor of the kitchen. In his lap was the body of a woman. A young, beautiful woman with soft curls, blood pooled beneath her like dark syrup. Her chest wasn't rising. He saw the gun across the floor, a Glock, still warm from the final shot. And then the man looked up at him. "She's gone," he whispered. Hayes drew his weapon. "Sir, step away from the body. Hands where I can see them." Darius didn't move. He just stared, eyes glassy and vacant. "I said hands." "She lied to me," Darius said, quieter now. "She was someone else. I didn't know. I didn't know." By the time backup arrived, Officer Hayes had Darius cuffed, read him his rights, and walked him out to the cruiser. Darius didn't resist. He moved like a man in a trance, staring down at his hands like they no longer belonged to him. At the station, they processed him under bright fluorescent lights, fingerprinted, photographed, questioned. The booking officer noted the deep scratches on his forearm, self-inflicted after the shooting. They asked if he wanted medical treatment. He said no. They asked if he wanted a lawyer. He said nothing, just stared. News broke within hours. Honeymoon horror in Blue Ridge. Groom arrested for brutal murder of new wife. Transgender bride killed by husband after secret revealed. Deadly deception or hate crime. Community demands answers. The press didn't waste time. Elena's gender identity became the headline. Every photo of her, smiling in her wedding dress, holding Darius's hand, was picked apart by people who didn't know her name a week ago. And Darius's mugshot, cold eyes, dried blood on his cheek, became the face of fury, confusion, and tragedy. In the interrogation room, Darius finally spoke after 6 hours of silence. Detective Lisa Rayner sat across from him. Late 40s, sharp eyes, mother of two. She didn't start with questions. She started with silence. Let the weight of the room do the talking. Eventually, Darius exhaled. She wasn't who she said she was. Rayner leaned forward. Who did she say she was? He swallowed. Elena. And who was she? He hesitated. Jordan. My best friend. From high school. She transitioned. Never told me. I found out during our honeymoon. Rayner nodded slowly. And that's why you killed her. His eyes welled, but he didn't look away. She took something from me. My trust. My identity. I didn't know who I was anymore after that. Rayner studied him for a long moment. Mr. Simmons, did you ever stop to think about what she gave up just to be who she truly was? How hard that must have been for her to love you, while hiding that truth, not out of malice, but out of fear. He didn't respond. She placed a photo on the table, the one taken at the wedding, Elena looking up at him, smiling like the world finally made sense. She loved you, Rayner said. Whatever else she was, that part was real. The DA moved fast. The evidence was overwhelming. 6 bullet wounds, a registered weapon, a handwritten note of forgiveness found in her hand. The prosecution built a case of first-degree murder, driven by hate and betrayal. They painted Darius as a man who couldn't accept the truth and chose violence instead of understanding. But the public was split. Some saw Darius as a monster. Others saw him as a man pushed past the edge by a deception too deep to forgive. Civil rights groups held vigils for Elena outside the courthouse, placing flowers, candles, and signs that read, her name was Elena. Trans lives matter. Love shouldn't get you killed. Meanwhile, behind bars, Darius barely spoke. He refused visitors, didn't eat much, just stared out the window of his cell like he was waiting for someone who'd never come. One night, another inmate, a man named Theo, asked him what happened. She lied, Darius mumbled. Theo nodded. We all lie, but most of us don't bury the truth in someone's chest. Darius didn't respond. He just laid down, closed his eyes, and whispered to the ceiling. I didn't kill her because she was trans. I killed her because I didn't know how to love what I didn't understand. But no one heard that part. No judge, no jury, no headline. Just the walls. Just the silence. Just the walls. Just the silence. That night, his first night alone in the cell, Darius didn't sleep. Not really. His eyes were closed, his body still, but his mind slipped into a place darker than any prison. And in that dream, she came. Not bleeding. Not broken. Just Elena. She stood at the edge of his bunk, wearing the same ivory dress from their wedding. Her hands were clean. Her voice was quiet. You didn't have to do it, she said. I would have forgiven you anyway. Darius opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. You think you were the only one scared? She asked, stepping closer. You think I wasn't terrified every single day? Of telling you. Of losing you. Of not being enough. She knelt beside him. Her eyes, those warm, honey-brown eyes, shimmered. But I loved you, Darius. God, I loved you. He reached for her, but his hands went right through. She faded like smoke, and he woke up, sweating, shaking, gasping for breath. The ceiling above him was cracked. His mouth tasted like metal. He reached for his chest, expecting blood, expecting the gun again. But there was nothing, just fabric, flesh, regret. He didn't scream. He didn't pray. He got up, placed his blanket on the floor, and lay down on the cold concrete, face up, arms crossed. From that night on, he never slept on the bunk again, never touched the tray of food that had anything warm in it, never accepted the antidepressants the medical officer tried to push. It wasn't punishment, it was penance, because in the cold, in the hunger, in the ache, he felt closer to her than he ever had in real life. And somehow that felt right. State of Georgia versus Darius Simmons. The courtroom was packed, not with family. Elena had no known relatives in the state, but with strangers, activists, journalists, students, and people who came just to look this man in the eye. The man who, in the public's imagination, represented a boiling point, gender identity, masculinity, betrayal, violence. The case gripped the country, not just because of how she died, but because of who she was, and who he became the moment he pulled the trigger. The prosecution wasted no time. They called it premeditated murder, cold-blooded, calculated. 6 bullets, a registered firearm, no forced entry, no struggle. A honeymoon turned homicide, not in the heat of passion, but after a slow, deliberate unraveling. Ladies and gentlemen, the district attorney began, pacing before the jury. This wasn't just about a secret. This was about control. Mr. Simmons felt entitled to the truth on his terms. When that didn't happen, he didn't walk away. He didn't seek help. He executed her. In her own kitchen. The photos they showed were brutal. Elena's body crumpled in blood. The mug with hazelnut coffee spilled across the floor. The note clenched in her hand. And Darius, in the background of one photo, knees stained red, staring into the void. The jury shifted in their seats. Some looked away. Then came the defense. His attorney, Martin Kellerman, was an older black man with a calm voice and tired eyes. He didn't deny that Darius pulled the trigger. He didn't spin fantasy. Instead, he told the story behind the story. This case isn't just about a gun, he said. It's about identity, about trauma, about how we, as a society, have failed to teach our men how to feel pain without turning it into rage. He painted Darius as a man raised in a world that told him what it meant to be a man. Strong, in control, always certain, never vulnerable. And when those beliefs were shattered by the truth about Elena, he didn't know how to process it. The defense called psychologists, experts in gender identity and trauma. One clinical therapist testified that Darius experienced a severe identity collapse when he learned of Elena's past, a phenomenon where a person's sense of reality disintegrates under psychological shock. The courtroom became a battlefield of words versus meaning. Was it hate or heartbreak? Was Elena's omission a fatal deception or an act of self-preservation? A former friend of Darius, Marcus Patterson, took the stand. Darius loved her, he said, voice cracking. I saw it. He lit up when he talked about her. He was planning a second child, man. He was all in. And when that broke, something in him broke too. The crowd outside the courthouse grew each day. Trans activists held signs that read, "Justice for Elena. Being yourself shouldn't be a death sentence." Counter-protesters showed up too, some claiming Darius was the victim, that he was lied to, manipulated. The media ate it up. Day after day, America watched as one question echoed louder than the verdict itself. What defines truth in love? Then came the most emotional moment of the trial. The prosecution played the 911 call. It was the neighbor, her voice frantic, saying she heard gunshots. But faintly, in the background was Darius's voice, picked up from inside the cabin before officers arrived. I didn't want this. I didn't want this. And then, she lied. But I still loved her. God help me, I still loved her. Several jurors wiped their eyes. But love, the prosecution argued, does not justify 6 bullets. In closing arguments, the DA delivered the final blow. Elena Harris didn't die because she lied. She died because she trusted a man who thought her truth made her disposable. The defense countered softer now. Darius Simmons is not a monster. He is a man raised in a world where masculinity is brittle, where emotion is weakness, where being vulnerable is dangerous. What he did was unforgivable, but it wasn't born from hate. It was born from storm that no one taught him how to survive. Then, 12 people, one jury, one decision. They deliberated for 9 hours. When they returned, the courtroom held its breath. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the second degree. Gasps, silence, and then sobs. The judge delivered the sentence the next morning. 35 years in state prison. No possibility of parole for the first 25. The room was quiet. Darius didn't react. He stood, nodded at the judge, and whispered something under his breath that only the bailiff heard. I'm sorry, Elena. As he was led away in cuffs, a journalist shouted, Do you feel remorse? He didn't answer. But later, in a letter sent from his prison cell to the court, a letter that was never published, only entered quietly into the case file. He wrote, "I didn't kill her because she was trans. I killed her because I was afraid. Afraid of how much I loved someone I didn't understand. And I hated myself for it more than I ever hated her." The Georgia State Penitentiary in Jackson was gray, cold, and silent most nights. But for Darius Simmons, silence had become home. It had been 3 years since the trial. 3 years since the cameras left. Since the headlines moved on. Since America forgot the man who killed his wife 2 days into their honeymoon. But Darius remembered. Every day, every night, every time he closed his eyes and saw Elena's. He had refused all interviews, declined calls from podcasters, TV producers, even Netflix. He didn't want his story to become entertainment. Not when someone had died. Not when it was his hands that pulled the trigger. But one night, he asked the prison chaplain for a camera. Nothing fancy, just something simple. He wanted to record a video. Not for the world. Not even for his family. But for her. For Elena. The chaplain, an older man who never once judged him, agreed. They set up a small handheld camcorder in the prison library. No lights. No makeup. Just Darius, an orange jumpsuit, a worn wooden chair, and a truth he'd never dared say out loud. The red light blinked on. He looked into the lens, not with pride, not with anger, but with something rawer, something closer to surrender. He began, "If you're watching this, then maybe the world hasn't completely forgotten me yet. Or maybe you're just curious about how a man could marry someone he loved and kill her 2 days later." He exhaled slowly. "I used to think I knew what it meant to be a man. I thought it meant being strong, being respected, being in control. I was taught that love was something you give when it's safe, when it's simple. And if it ain't simple, then it ain't love. But then I met Elena." He paused. His voice cracked. "She made me feel seen, safe, like I could breathe again after years of holding it all in. I didn't fall for a body. I fell for a soul, for her mind, her heart, her laugh. And yes, I thought I was marrying the most honest, beautiful woman I'd ever known." He leaned forward slightly. "Then I found out she used to be Jordan Harris, my best friend from high school. A boy, the only person who ever truly knew me when I was broken." He swallowed hard. "I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know how to hold 2 truths in my hands. That I was in love with a woman who used to be a man I once called my brother. It wasn't the trans part that killed me. It was the betrayal. The feeling that I had become a lie because I didn't see it. Because I loved someone I wasn't supposed to. Because the world told me that made me less of a man." He looked down, fought the tears, lost. "So I did the only thing I knew. I turned fear into rage, and rage into murder. I told myself she lied, that she tricked me, that she deserved what happened. But the truth is none of that was true. The only thing she ever wanted was to be loved without conditions. And I could have been that man, but I wasn't brave enough." He took a long breath. His voice quieter now. "Elena, if there's anything beyond this life, and if somehow you can hear me, I need you to know something. You didn't fail me. I failed you. I took your truth and made it about my shame. I took your love and turned it into fear. And in that kitchen, when you looked at me and said you forgave me, even before I pulled the trigger, that moment will haunt me until the day I die." A long silence followed. He reached into his jumpsuit and pulled out a small, folded slip of paper. It was her note, the one she held in her hand the day she died. The prison let him keep it. He had read it every single night since his sentencing. "I forgive you, even if you never forgive me." He held it up to the camera. "I don't deserve that forgiveness, but I carry it anyway, because that's the only way I survive now. So if this recording ever reaches someone who's hurting, someone who's ashamed of who they love, or who they are, I beg you, don't do what I did. Don't let shame kill something pure. Don't mistake your fear for truth. Because love, real love, is never a lie." He sat back in the chair, looked into the lens one last time, and then he whispered. Her name was Elena Harris, and she deserved better than me. The red light blinked off. A few months later, the chaplain uploaded the recording to a private YouTube channel under Elena's name. No comments, no likes. Just her photo, the wedding day smile, and a video called Final Confession. It never went viral. but didn't need to, because the people who needed to hear it, they found it. And in those 13 minutes, they heard the truth not from a courtroom, not from a prosecutor, but from a broken man who had nothing left to lose except the chance to finally tell the truth. And maybe, just maybe, that was the justice Elena had always wanted. Not revenge, not rage, just truth. 2 weeks after the video was posted, the prison chaplain brought Darius a letter. No return address, no name, just a plain white envelope with careful handwriting that read, "From Mr. Darius Simmons." Darius opened it slowly. Inside was a single page, written in blue ink. The handwriting was slightly uneven, like someone trying to steady themselves through emotion. It read, "Dear Mr. Simmons, I watched your video. I'm 19. I'm trans. My parents kicked me out last year. I've been couch surfing ever since. I almost ended everything last month. Then I saw you, saw your face, heard your voice, heard the pain in it, the truth in it. And for some reason, it made me feel like maybe I wasn't invisible. Maybe I wasn't disgusting. Maybe someone like you, someone who messed up but still had the guts to say it. Maybe you could make people see me for who I am. So thank you. You saved someone you'll never meet. And I'll never forget your name. Jay." Darius sat still for a long time after reading it. Then, for the first time in over 3 years, he did something no one in that prison had ever seen him do. He smiled. It wasn't wide. It wasn't joyful. But it was real. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of redemption. Not for what he did, but for what he finally understood.